Hi, welcome to Agribusiness Global Live. My name is Renee Targus. I'm the editor for Agribusiness Global and your host for today's webinar, Southeast Asia New Molecules Market. We've got a great discussion today covering a wide range of topics. If you're interested in Southeast Asia, Agribusiness Global is having our Southeast Asia virtual seminar. It's our first one, and we're very excited about it, especially with the presenters we've got. It'll teach you a lot of things about the Southeast Asia market, but also how to diversify your portfolio if you're thinking about including biologicals. So it's 6 to 8:30 p.m. Pacific time. And there's a QR code on this image right here. If you take a picture with your phone, it'll take you to the website, or you can visit AgbioInvestor.com for more information and to register for it. So we hope to see you there, especially if you're interested in the topic of Southeast Asia. All right, so let's meet the panelists. We've got some great experts here who ABG has worked with before, and I'm excited to introduce you to them. Let's start with Lawrence Midler. He's our biological senior analyst from AgbioInvestor. He's based in Scotland, and he's our expert analyst for the crop protection and biologicals market for this discussion. We've got Dr. Peter Chalmers. He's a scouting associate for Accumont Advisors. He's based in Australia, and he's had about 10 years in Singapore and working with the Asia Pacific region. He's our expert on mergers and acquisitions for this discussion. And then we've got Aaron Magenheim. He's the COO and co-founder of Lighthouse.Ag. He's based in the US, and he'll be our ag tech expert for today's discussion. So let's just start right off the bat, and we'll start with Lawrence. Lawrence, you'll be up. So can you kind of give us an update of what are AgBio investors finding on new molecules and formulations being introduced in the Southeast Asia region?
Sure, yeah. So thank you very much, Renee. And just like to introduce myself and say a little bit about my background. So I'm one of the senior analysts within the AgbioInvestor team. My background began initially in the field of chemistry, so working in contract research in support of the registration of new ag vet molecules before joining what was Phillips McDougall back in 2014. I've since joined AgbioInvestor in 2023, where I lead up our biologicals analysis department, but I still have a keen focus on novel active ingredients and associated technologies. So today I'm going to highlight some of the key trends that we've observed in our market research data around formulations in Southeast Asia. So the first point that I'd like to highlight comes from on the conventional crop protection side. So looking at the market research data that we have, there is a clear trend towards the adoption of suspension concentrate formulations over emulsifiable concentrates in many key markets, particularly China, both in terms of volume and value. However, emulsifiable concentrates do remain by far the most significant in volume terms in China and have not declined drastically. Okay, emulsifiable concentrates have been one of the most significant formulation types in recent decades and are typically formulated by dissolving the active ingredient with emulsifiers and surfactants in a solvent. As this solvent is typically derived from petroleum products, there has been a push towards increasing the sustainability and improving the handling characteristics of products in the market. A key part of the trend toward adopting more suspension concentrate formulations over EC is that they typically have a much lower organic solvent load that ends up in the environment and also have a greater safety profile in other areas such as reduced flammability and so on. So in this regard, suspension concentrates have seen an increase in both marketing effort from the companies seeking to boost the sustainability of their offerings, but also in response to the sustainability goals of the countries themselves. So this is likely one of the key reasons why we've seen this trend play in China as the government seeks to increase the agricultural sustainability in the country. The dynamic in India and other parts of Southeast Asia that we've surveyed, such as the Philippines, is somewhat similar, and that there has been a slight drop-off in EC volumes and value and an uplift in SC value and volumes. One point I would note, however, is that in many markets where pesticide usage is below the average of more developed markets, India being a good example, Although there is some product substitution from EC to SC, overall volumes in the industry will both will likely rise in the longer term, just as the country seeks to intensify agriculture. However, I would expect the SC within that could potentially rise faster in value terms, just down to some of the newer actives that are coming onto the market. Many of those are often higher price active ingredients that are contained within the formulation. So in value terms, we could see a faster rate of growth. In markets such as Japan, there is a similar trend playing out somewhat, but against the backdrop of a relatively stagnant crop protection market. Here, the dominant formulation type is typically that of granular formulations, primarily for rice, where innovation is perhaps more limited. Another significant trend in India and China that I would highlight is that there has been rapid growth, both volume and value, in EW, which is emulsion and water formulations, as these also offer an alternative to the solvent load that's present in older EC formulations. Water dispersible granules have also increased in market penetration in both India and China, but particularly so in China, with a number of key benefits of this formulation being favourable handling characteristics, simple dilution practices, lower inhalation risks compared to some of the wet powders and other dust-based formulations, lower transportation costs due to the concentrated nature, which is also positive for developing markets like India. And it also reduced things like sedimentation and crystal growth, so some stability benefits there as well. Seed treatment formulations, these have also been rising rapidly, both in volume and value terms in China for a number of reasons, including the more widespread adoption of higher priced hybrid seed varieties. And also boosted by farmers increasing awareness and desire to protect those higher priced seed varieties. The importance of driving food production to support an increase in population has also led to the desire to look at a much broader spectrum of technologies in the country. So a process that we term technification of ag. This also includes using seed treatments to support the early plant health through insect and disease control in the root zone and early post-emergence. And another point I would note is that in terms of GM crops, the Chinese Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs has approved over 30 corn varieties and around 14 soybean varieties for production, sale and distribution. So again, that's another outlet for seed treatments, and we could see further growth in that market in the future. Looking at the biologicals markets, this is an area I look at quite closely. A key outlet for microbial actives such as BT is that of suspension concentrates and wet powders in China, and also in addition to those two formulation types of wet powders in India. So clearly biological product formulation is an area which perhaps more than any other requires a robust approach to optimization. So this includes the need to develop formulations that maintain the best possible shelf life, storage stability, adhesion, rain fastness, and so on. As many biopesticides are sensitive to moisture, particularly microbial-based species, the use of oil dispersion formulations can assist with stability, particularly if a plant oil is used as the oil phase to sustain the biological nature of the product. And this oil, in fact, can also act as an adjuvant, enhance retention, spreading and penetration, and so on. And if it's certain components, certain essential oils, it may also have additional properties, things like insecticidal action as well. Encapsulation of biological products is another area of development that we've noted in the industry. It can be used to improve the general shelf stability and also allow active ingredients to enter the market that are perhaps of less stable or more heterogeneous character, for example. Here, capsules are typically produced from starch, cellulose, or other polymers to create or to protect the active moiety from extremes of environmental conditions, things like UV radiation, rain, temperature, and so on. and can also assist with controlled release of the product, ensuring best possible efficacy. So capsule suspension is a good example of this, where surfactants and thickeners are used to stabilize and increase suspension of the microencapsulated biological AI. Key innovations such as nanoemulsions, nanosuspensions, and nanocapsule technologies is another potential area of development for the biologicals formulation market, and offer many key benefits, such as assisting with, again, stability, sustained release, and also the coverage and penetration of the product, which again can boost the efficacy and future sales of that particular product. And this can be particularly important with plant extract products, where there's often a high degree of heterogeneity in particle and molecular sizing. But the downside to these formulations is that they're typically higher cost solutions and often require specific expertise in order to develop the right formulations, but also the capital in order to scale up production to really realise economies of scale. If we add this to the often higher price point of the biological active ingredients themselves, then this may limit the adoption of these products, particularly in Southeast Asia in the future, where many of the growers are typically smallholder and therefore income sensitive. So most of the markets in Southeast Asia that we look at are all typically working towards increasing their biological product adoption, with much of the opportunity in these countries likely to come from the stimulating effect of government policies and subsidies that will ultimately kickstart further adoption. So this could provide some opportunities for the companies that have the best focus on R&D and formulation technologies for biological products, and that should hopefully boost efficacy and further boost the marketing effort in these countries.
Okay, great.
Slight downside. Yes, go ahead.
I had a question. You're talking about the biologicals, but I know that like Syngenta, there's some other top tier companies are creating, formulations where they're not affecting their chemical pesticides, but they're not affecting the soil as bad. Do you see any sort of adoption of those happening in the Southeast Asia region as well, to kind of lower prices, but also meet those environmental standards?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's ultimately down to a couple of factors. So the pricing of the active ingredients, of course, because a lot of the newer formulation technologies are typically used around some of the proprietary chemistries that are coming out. And also it does depend on the technology that's being used. So if it's, for example, that I touched on, microencapsulation, if that's the route that they're going, then that could potentially add cost and potentially limit some of the uptake in these markets. Okay, so one point that I would add to the Southeast Asia market is there are, of course, challenges around registering biological products, and part of this comes down to, in many cases, the lack of an efficient or harmonised registration process, and in some cases, the high cost of bringing products to market. So that may ultimately limit some of the innovation that's brought to market for biologicals in these markets, because it may be that the sort of lower cost or relatively lower cost formulations within biologicals have to be targeted at those markets. And just to finish up, another point I would note is that we have seen an increasing use of drone application in many markets, which has the potential to save growers time and labour costs in managing pests across relatively large areas of land. And one of the key factors within this is that it's a requirement to ultimately develop ultra low volume formulations. And we also expect that the impact of the drone application will largely be felt in the sort of smaller farms within Southeast Asia, so particularly in China, India, and to some extent Japan as well, where many of these smallholders are perhaps willing to try some of these new technologies, and down to the low application or application capacity within these drones relative to some of the more broadacre farms in North America, for example. that's where we're likely to see a relatively greater uptake. Okay, so ULV formulations, they're ultimately designed to be sprayed with a limited dilution. Therefore, the solubility of the AI is crucial to assessing their suitability for use. ULV formulations often contain surfactants and drift control agents. However, we haven't seen a great deal of herbicide usage in ultra-low formulations, and that's ultimately down to the higher concentration load could create some phytotoxicity issues with the crop itself, perhaps even for some of the selective herbicides. So it's an area where we haven't seen much penetration of herbicides into ultra-low formulations. Another challenge that we have noted with ultra-low volume formulations is that they do present some challenges, as you'd expect, around flocculation and also nozzle clogging. So it's just another area where the R&D effort will be needed to select the best formulation technologies, but also the best active ingredients that are suitable for those application routes. Okay, so that covers my initial points. Renee, I'd be happy to take any questions or hand over to the next panelist.
Yeah, okay, great. So again, we'll be answering questions at the end of this discussion. So if you had any questions for Lawrence, we'll take those in about 30 minutes. So Dr. Chalmers, so what are the crop protection companies in this region looking to acquire or merge with? Let's just start with that question.
Great. Thanks, Renee. To introduce myself, Peter Chalmers. I've been in Asia Pacific for many years in agriculture, based now in Brisbane, Australia, but spent 10 years in Singapore, as Renee has said, and with a lot of experience around all of the Asia Pacific markets, from Japan to India, from China to New Zealand. And I think it's a commonality. It is, if you like, not area Pacific, but crop protection countries in Southeast Asia, they're the same as the rest of the world. They're really looking for new and innovative solutions that address unmet needs of farmers. And I think that's the key point, is to define these unmet needs. A lot of these needs are being met. When I first started in the industry, you would have crops like a pigeonhole and diseases and pests and weeds, and you'd have very few opportunities or very few solutions. Now there are multiple solutions in every crop for every pest, weed and disease. However, they're being challenged by a whole range of things, such as the environment, sustainability, resistance, and a whole range of factors. And this is where I think biological solutions have a particularly a strong message to bring, and also a strong way to approach that problem, because you can introduce innovative solutions and new products that actually do address these needs. However, and like it's everywhere else in the world, some of the problems that Southeast Asia, and Lawrence has already highlighted a couple of those in terms of the registration and all of the laws that are different in every country. Every country has its own language, everyone has its own regulatory process, and so there is no harmonisation. Now, a lot of people are working towards that, and I think the regulatory system to bring new products, chemical and biological, into the marketplace are now moving towards a better and a similar approach in countries, but it's not exactly the same. And I think one of the things that this then creates is, the key part in this whole process is for technologies and local companies to be connected, so that there is a very successful path to market for the developers of the new products, and also for those companies and distributors that are looking to bring these solutions to their farmers. From an investment perspective, money is very tight. Money is much tighter than 2 years ago. It's much tighter than 5 years ago. And so investors are now looking at companies in technology. And investors, I mean, it's people investing in these technologies to bring and develop the new products. It's also mergers and acquisitions. You're being acquired, or what are you trying to do? So it is very competitive, but those companies are looking, they're much more cautious than a few years ago. And this includes, everything that we're talking about. They're targeting things that are much more advanced in terms of TRL levels, technology readiness levels, and they're looking for things that are more de-risked, so the investments can be made. And I think the biological or biocontrol industry, its track record, if you look back in the past, has been rather poor, and a lot of money has been invested in new companies and new technologies, way above what was possibly about to be returned. However, there is a lot of things that are happening out there, and a lot of really smart, smaller, agile, focused biotech-based businesses that are chasing investors to support their development for their innovative biocontrol solutions. And they're looking primarily at the bigger crop protection markets currently. Obviously, the US is big and Europe is big, even though the registration timelines are horrendously long still for both chemicals and biologicals. They're now starting to look beyond that when they see their initial markets. And of course, Asia Pacific, the markets, also LATAM and also Brazil do come to mind, because they're also big opportunities outside US and Europe. So there's lots of opportunities out there for people coming. The other things that I'm seeing out there, which I think is very interesting, is that it's been traditionally the home of the multinational companies bringing new chemistry on. Those pipelines, the new chemical pipelines, are starting to dry up, and these new modes of action, they're not coming with the same rapidity that they did 20, 30, 40 years ago. And there's an opportunity for biological products to actually then provide that change, because they are by definition almost new modes of action. But I'm also seeing what's happening in countries like China and India, where there's a lot of activity in research that's being driven by governments and policy to move the boundaries more towards environmentally sustainable solutions. And they're coming up with many, many more quite clever and quite innovative biological solutions. You shouldn't leave out the other areas in the region: Korea, Japan, Australia to a lesser extent, and even small countries like New Zealand are becoming very, very creative and looking for how to bring these technologies from small countries with small agriculture into the wider crop protection industry. So, I think there's a lot of opportunities out there, and I think many, many people are looking for biological solutions, and I think it is very good. Now, not to steal Aaron's thunder, but I think one of the things we also have to do, we've got to understand the size of the market. And Lawrence, you knowing where that is coming from, you've got the technology, you've got to put it together with the complete package of solutions, be they digital, be they precision agriculture, be they formulation delivery systems that actually take the biological effect that you're trying to do from a chemical plant or a fermentation process, and then you've got to put it into a spray unit, whether that's a drone, a small helicopter, a large helicopter, someone with a knapsack or a boom spray, and you've got to deliver that desired effect to the point where you are trying to control that pest, weed, or disease. I think one of the key things here is that we can't use the same, a spray and pray approach, which was very easy to do when you had chemicals, because they were robust and easy, and you could mistreat them. You really couldn't muck it up. So that spray and pray approach, you've got to be a little bit more sensitive when it comes to handling biological solutions, because they are a little bit more sensitive to pressures and stresses, and you need to be able to deliver, for example, your microorganism in a viable manner to the plant that you're trying to protect. You can't hit it with a hammer and expect it to survive. So I think it's important that we look at all of these things and bring it together, which is a partnership approach. And I think that is where, if you like, where the local company, the local distributors, they have to start looking at how they can then bring biocontrol solutions to the market. They've got to enhance their skill base. They've got to look at the capabilities of their organisation in order to be able to deliver some of these new solutions to their farmers. And together, that I think is where the magic happens. And that's where the investment, the mergers and acquisitions actually make the most amount of inroads, because you've got all parties at the start, the finish, and the end. They all come together. In my long time in agriculture, I hate to say I've been around it far too long, the R&D is the easy part. The R&D is also the cheap part. The most expensive part is getting the distribution and bringing it in that go-to-market sense correct. And that's where investors are looking about how do they then maximise their return, getting great technologies and delivering those potential solutions into the marketplace so that they can get a return on everyone's investment. So I hope that's a bit of a feel for where things are, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I just have one follow-up question. So, with you seeing the activity of the mergers and acquisitions and, people wanting to acquire biological companies, are you seeing any trends in sort of, are biostimulants are people looking at biostimulants or nanotechnology? Like what's kind of the trend of what a lot of companies are looking to invest in or acquire?
They're looking at a range of solutions. So it's not one or the other. I think from a biocontrol point of view, the conventional crop protection industry looking at, controlling pests with a pesticide, controlling pest, weed and disease, there's a lot more activity on biostimulants. There's no doubt about that. There is also a lot of, snake oil that comes with that approach. I think that's now changing. There's much more known about how the abiotic stresses, not the disease or the insect that's killing the plant, but it's all the issues of enhancing nutrition, making sure you've got drought-efficient crops that you can grow. And the biostimulants are addressing those sort of issues, and they're becoming much more important to growers. A grower will provide... A grower doesn't necessarily look at dead insects or fungal disease control. What he actually looks at is how many apples do I have in the harvest bin at the end of the year. So the biostimulants can be adding to that, your harvest. They're absolutely being adopted by farmers, and they're being adopted by distributors bringing these to the market. So I think we as an industry need to look a little bit broader than just crop protection. It's got to be a little bit more about crop enhancement and ensuring that you've got productivity for farmers.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lawrence and Peter. You guys are both giving me a lot of information that I'll have questions on if we don't have any questions from the audience. But we're going to kind of change a little bit of direction. We're going to talk about ag tech and specifically artificial intelligence and how that's used in formulation. So, Aaron, can you give us an update about the use of artificial intelligence in creating formulations in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Renee. Peter, thank you for kind of setting up some of my conversation pieces as well. I think the snake oil thing is interesting, and I come from the irrigation and kind of digital technology side of things, and I always said, there's a lot of snake oil. That's why I don't want to touch the biological side. But what I've learned is that, we just don't understand the basics of how, how the crop and the soil and kind of the ecosystem is working well enough. So, formulation may work very well in one situation and not work at all in another one. And so I think those are the things that are important. For myself, I've worked quite a bit in Southeast Asia as well as Latin America and of course North America, where I'm based. But I think you have different challenges with different sizes of farmers and different different climate matters in these different locations. And so I'll throw out a few of the use cases to start with, and then talk a little bit more about kind of the baseline, which is I think one of the pieces that we're lacking across the industry right now to be able to take advantage of this. You know, like anything else, a lot of times we hear garbage in, garbage out. You know, if we don't have good information or good historics to understand, you know, what are the situations, what has been applied, what's been the cause and the effect in the past, it's really hard to use AI to be able to give you recommendations and kind of improve your decision making. So when we look at some of the use cases, you know, I think we're moving towards, you know, less generic and more specific formulations as well. And we've heard some of that just on this webinar today. So, you know, being able to use AI to kind of augment a person's knowledge, everything's in someone's head, and we can only calculate so much data in our head. You know, we remember this happened at that point sometime in the past, and what did we do, and did it work, did it not? And so, you know, being able to kind of augment a person's knowledge and replicate the results that they wanted, and know all the parameters that got them to that end result that was successful, or to the ones that were unsuccessful, are just as much of a learning opportunity. So, you know, I think from a high level, being able to alert and mitigate risk based off of many parameters, again, not just waiting until someone scouted a field and sees a problem, or you know, something along those lines, but being able to use different models and different inputs to know that these are certain circumstances that are causing problems that's going to you know, that should trigger us to go out and either look at something or take an action. And so you know, I think from a high level, that's one way. You know, at the end of the day, we have the tools to be able to, you know, talk into your phone to a chat box and say, hey, you know, what's the best tool? What's the best formulation for farm 5, block 47, for, you know, this problem? And, you know, and even to be able to take a picture of it and have the app say, this is the problem that you're seeing. I think, especially in Southeast Asia, where we don't, you know, we have smaller farmers a lot of times, and we don't have, you know, as many advisors, you know, being able to take pictures of something and have it tell you what the problem is. And then, you know, we have tools that then it can make a recommendation based off of where you're at, what crop you're growing, you know, and some of this historic information. Those are the types of things that I think are really interesting. So, you know, AI can look at millions of data points, and then, you know, prompt, you know, the kind of, you know, based off of your goals as well, you know, be able to prompt the right kind of prescription or the right recommendation for how to solve, you know, solve the challenge or potential challenge that you're facing. So I think, you know, think about like where formulations is going as a Keurig, you know, like the little coffee machine. You say, hey, I want a cappuccino, I want it this size, I want this much milk, I want a double shot. You know, you have all of these options. I think right now we have all of those formulations, and we have all of these biologicals and things that are sitting there, but what do we want for each field? That's a piece that is a pretty manual process. So being able to take kind of that historic information, and be able to then, you know, say, hey, this is the goal. What is my goal? You know, is it maximize yield? Is it size? Is it quality? Is it is it harvest date? You know, what are we trying to achieve, I think, on the overall crop? And then what are we trying to achieve, you know, right now? You know, are we trying to knock down a problem? Are we trying to eliminate it? You know, depending again on kind of the different modes that you have available, and you know, and your you know, and your abilities to apply. So then I think, yeah.
Oh, Aaron, I just had a quick question. And I don't want to interrupt you. you and I had talked before about, companies like, I think you had said some of the bigger companies, the multinationals, were using like spreadsheets for their research and development, and you were talking about using AI as a way to create a database. So there's all this knowledge, in one's like to create formulations. Like, where is that at as far as in the industry? I'm sorry if you're going to tackle
Yeah,
that next.
no, that was actually one of my next points here, and I think that's a challenge that we don't realize is so far behind. That I was out at a seed and chemical research farm a few days ago, and watching researchers out there counting things by hand, putting it into Excel sheets, and then what do you do with this? Well, we review it, and then it sits in a database, and so not being accessible, more or less, database meaning Excel sheets. And so when you're able to start bringing all that data together, I think a lot of people on this call probably have Excel sheets with 50 different tabs on it and multiple Excel sheets that you can't say, based off of the information here, give me the result of X, Y. Like, you have to go through and look at that. And so those are the types of things that AI can do. And I think a lot of people have probably played with, Chat GPT and some of these tools where it'll give you, more or less generic information off the internet. And we all see that some of those tools aren't necessarily ready for prime time to make business decisions, but there's more specific tools that you can use to load up all of your data, all of your trials, everything that you've done, across an entire portfolio of materials, and then be able to ask it questions. So those are the types of things that, I mean, someone can probably put together a fancy Excel sheet and get pieces of that, but nowhere near the user experience or just the access to the information that we should have. I mean, you can load up hundreds of research publications from around the globe and have it basically pull together what is the right information or the direction that we should look for this specific problem. So there you can really kind of augment a lot of the work that we're doing today. And but the first step is we have to start getting this information into different databases that can be accessed by these tools. So I think the other piece is that they're machine learning models as well. So the more information you get it, you're able to train it on, this is what happened, this is the result, and this is my goal. Again, if we don't know the goal or where we're trying to get, it's really hard for it to give us a direction on what makes the most sense. I think the last kind of use case that I wanted to cover was just variable rate application, spot spraying, more targeted, less use of generic products, that type of stuff. So moving into that, it's variable rate is something that you need imaging, you need people, knowledge, you need, to be able to put this into an equipment, or, tell a person what to do, tell a drone what to do, where to go. So I think those are some of the use cases, for AI as it, as it revolves around some of the applications, and not only mixing and understanding what that formulation is, but the application side as well. The other piece I wanted to kind of touch on was that garbage in, garbage out. Like, we really have to start with a lot of baseline data, and historic information is great, but we have to know that it was collected in somewhat as a standardized way, because if there's the 30% deviation between how the information was connected, then as you start stacking AI on top of it, then you're going to get even wider and wider, and so the results are not going to be right. And that's where I think a lot of the snake oil and just the incorrect results that we see from different activities come from. So you know, again, what is the goal? I think that's one of the most important things. What do we want to end up with? Are we trying to maximize yield? Are we trying to maximize profits? Are we trying to maximize size, optimize size, harvest dates, etc.? So I think starting there is important. And then having that, you know, baseline kind of historic data, soil types, nutrients that were applied, nutrients that are there now, you know, water, what is the quality, what's the characteristics of irrigation water if you're irrigating, you know, and what and how much was applied, when was it applied? So, you know, what we could, yeah, so being able to have that information, I think, as a starting point, let's go look at what information we have, get an analyst, let them start diving through just what's good, what's bad. From there, you can start looking at, that's kind of like a baseline, understanding where you're at, what you have. And then we can start looking at real-time information. So before we go out to make an application, or when we're looking at making a decision, or even building a crop plan for a year, being able to get real-time measurements. We have, you know, NIR sensors that we can go to the field with these tools and get real-time NPK on a plant. You're not having to send it into a lab. It's better than just looking at the plant. You can get color. We have different tools that you can get, you know, real-time information on what's happening in the soil. There's many different ways to get imaging, whether it's from satellite, gives you a good directional idea of what's happening. But having that historic information is important to run models and to get better. But then where am I at today and what is going on? So I can, you know, so we can kind of use, again, AI to help us make the right decisions, but it needs input. So you can build models, you can do things remotely, but then being able to pull kind of those right inputs together on where am I at today? What are my restraints on, do I have this material available? We have tools that'll tell you, give you a recommendation on what to apply, and then look in your inventory and say, do we have this, or is it going to take us a week to get it? Because if I don't have it, or I'm cost conscious, maybe I have something else that I can apply at a different rate to be able to still create the same effect. So there's all these things that, again, like you can try to do some of it in your head, but we're dealing with so many different data points and different pieces of information that you know, that's really where you know, these tools come in. And then I think the last point I'll touch on is just, you know, what are the results? And I think that's something when I talk with you know, ag retailers and advisors that are trying to provide the best sort of recommendations today, a lot of times they don't get the results from the crop. Like, what did you harvest? What was your yield? Was it what you were looking for or not? And like I think Peter mentioned, you know, what they care about is what got in the bin or what got in the silo. That's important at the end of the day. But if that's not fed back into the AI model, or not fed back into even you know, a more traditional advisor, then you don't know if you hit your goal and how far off you were. So these are the types of things that you have to have all the different pieces to put into the model. And then it can do some really amazing things.
All right, thanks, Aaron. You know, one of the things that I've been hearing, you know, kind of all of you guys talk about are like these advancements. But one of the things, you know, and I'm thinking about Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, you know, with the smallholder farmers, a lot of these countries are, you know, wanting more sustainability, but, you know, it's kind of come up over and over again that these small scale farmers don't really have the money to maybe purchase biologicals or ag tech, but what is sort of the status of that? And Lawrence, I want to start with you, and then Peter, and then Aaron, you know, covering your areas. But what's going on as far as, like, the government wants some more sustainable alternatives, so there's some bans on products, but with these countries, are biological companies able to go into these countries and make a profit if there's, you know, if there's not the money there for that? And what's your take on that, Lawrence?
Yeah, I think some of these smaller Southeast Asian markets are perhaps a little bit behind the curve in terms of biological adoptions. So, I mean, China's quite far ahead, as I'm sure most are aware. India's catching up as well, but many of these smaller markets think they're really just looking to, in terms of sustainability, look at some of the perhaps alternative conventional formulation technologies, so things like operator safety, and also that, like, for example, some of the excipients, the components that are within the formulation that are ending up in the environment as a major first step. And then I think the biologicals will come a little bit later. And I think, as I touched on in the sort of start of my presentation there, the regulation has to sort of catch up to a point where it is, attractive and economical to bring these biological products to these smaller markets. I think it will come, and potential government subsidies will play quite a large part, I think, in that.
Yeah, I know a lot of those governments are trying to encourage that, but I think, the money issue always seems to be, what's kind of holding things back. And Peter, what's your take on that?
Money's always going to be a factor, but if I can make a couple of comments from an AI point of view, nearly every farmer in Asia has got a smartphone, and I'm shocked at that 10 years ago, and I'm sure those that didn't have phones 10 years ago, they've got phones. So they're well connected from a technology point of view, and they have that ability from the internet to find solutions. I think one of the challenges is to ensure, because I don't think a farmer's going to try and use a solution that's going to cost him a lot more money if he's not going to get the return. So it's incumbent on the developers of the technology to be able to get them to a point where it's scaled to the right level, so you've got those economies of scale and manufacturing. You can then bring it into the marketplace with good formulations. I'm seeing great advances in WG formulations for microbials. Older style of formulations, very cost effective, but if you do them in the old way, then they're too harmful, they're too stressful on biologicals. But now with softer technology, you're doing them much more gently with lower pressure, therefore you're creating lower temperatures when you create the granules. You're using fluidized bed drying. You've got really good technology that gives you biological microbials that are stable for up to 2 years. They've got a 2-year shelf life. That's great. All of those things need to be worked through, and then you've got to have the technology that is getting it to the right place at the right time, which is, hey, you can, that hopefully there's a bit where you can bring the technology alongside with the new product, with the new formulation, and have your whole supply chain system aligned. And I think it was a point that that Aaron was making. There are so many things out there that we all know, but we know that piece and this piece and this piece and this piece. We need something to bring it all together. So with an integrated approach, I think there are great possibilities where you can address these things. I'm not a big fan of legislating the cheaper, cheerful, less environmentally friendly things out of the way so you can use or ensure that more expensive solutions can replace them. I don't think that's what we should be doing. We should be incentivizing everyone to make those solutions cost-effective, economical, and fit for purpose. It may not be, as you say, Aaron, it may not be, what's in the bin. It's exactly what you're after. Do you need to do it, how many days before harvest? What are you doing from a residue management point of view? All of those things to come together. From a point of view of the smaller markets in Southeast Asia, I agree with Lawrence's comments. They are coming. They are behind the curve, but they are coming up. And they are now much more focused on not putting themselves in harm's way. So there's still a long way to go, but I think they're heading in the right direction. And it's something that we've got to be quite mindful of. That's why we need to have solutions that are not only, very specific for controlling X, Y, or Z, or biostimulants for growth. They've also got to be low toxicity. We cannot introduce the same old that was done 40, 50 years ago. when the regulation was different, and then it was okay. A lot of things have changed, but that's where I think the biologicals have a good message to bring to the world, and it works in the US, it'll work in Europe, and if it'll work there, it'll work in Asia, and it'll work in LATAM, and it'll work in Africa. So I think that's important to have that perspective. If you can crack it for a broad acre, a row crop market, where the costs have got to be low, gee, I think you can do it in the specialty crops, fruits, vegetables. I think 60% of the world's fruit and veg come out of Asia. Okay, so a lot of the world is being fed out of Asia at the moment, and there's a lot of things where we can actually have these economies of scale.
Yeah, so from my standpoint, I mean, sustainability can mean different things. If you ask a farmer what does sustainability mean, they usually say it means that my business is going to be here for a certain amount of time. And so I think, one piece around sustainability is not necessarily, I mean, I think shifting to biologicals is great, but another piece is just applying the right thing, and applying the right amount. My wife's from the Philippines. I've spent a lot of time over there in other parts of Southeast Asia, and you go out and talk to people and you say, why are you spraying this? Well, because I think this is my problem. So I think this is what I should apply. And they're not actually applying something that fixes the problem, or they're applying something at a much higher rate that they need to, because they just don't have the knowledge. And so then you go and meet with the Department of Agriculture and research folks, and they have apps, they have tools, they have all of this R&D that they've done. And they're like, we have all this stuff, but we don't know, we don't have funding to get it out to the farmers. We just get funding to, and it's the same problem in the US and other places, is we have all of the answers. And a lot of times we even build them into apps, build them into tools that people can use, but we don't invest in getting those tools out to population, whether it's our own field people, advisors, or whether it's the population. So I think, being able to just get some of these different simple tools, being able to take pictures of what's happening out there, that type of stuff is, are we using the tools that we have today and that we understand in these markets? Are we using them effectively and in the right way to begin with? I think that's one of the first things. And then we can start definitely moving towards biologicals and a lot of the other things. But I always like to look at what is a half step. Like, how do we kind of take from where we're at without really shifting things, without, making people significantly change what they know and push them out of the comfort zone too fast. There's some half steps. So anyways, those are a couple of my thoughts on, how do you move some of this stuff.
Okay, great. Just so for those watching, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A below. We'll take your questions. Right now, there's no questions, so I have another question, again, for all three of you. You talked about drone formulation, Lawrence, and obviously the ag tech, Aaron and Peter, I know you work with some ag tech companies as well. So my question is, again, for those smaller countries, because I know China is doing great with drones. I know India is doing, they've passed legislation for drones. But what about, again, about the Vietnam and Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia? What's going on with drone formulation there, drone use? Can you give me an update on that? Lawrence, we'll start with you.
Yeah, again, I think it's similar to the biologicals comment that they're perhaps slightly behind the curve, but I think just down to the fact that a lot of these markets are quite big producers of fruit and veg crops, particularly tree fruits, tree nuts and so on, plantation crops. There is a clear fit there, but I think in terms of technology adoption, they might be slightly behind the curve, but probably somewhere in line with India, I would say. But I think China's certainly amongst the leaders in Southeast Asia in terms of drone application. Ultimately, it comes down to cost. Again, can the farmer invest in those technologies, because there's obviously a capital cost in investing in the drone. Are the ultra low formulations being offered at a competitive price, and so on. So I think again that's the key is the financial side.
Great. We've got about 6 minutes left. So Peter, I'd like to get your perspective, but just knowing we've got a time crunch.
So look, Lawrence has probably summed it up very nicely. But one of the things that I think is important to understand is that I don't know whether the technology developers are looking at it as well as they should, because the drone type of technology is basically small volumes and therefore highly concentrated volumes. So you've got to make sure you've got the formulation and which is basically the delivery system right. I'm not sure that those formulations specifically for drones are at the standard that they should be, and we obviously need to improve as we go forward. There's a lot of people that are, there's a lot of activity in drones through those Southeast Asian countries, the smaller ones, and they are picking it up, but I agree that they're probably behind the curve.
Okay. We've got a question from the audience, and I just want to make sure we get it answered. So Aaron, I don't know if you want to take this one or anybody else, just let me know. Will precision application technology stem the decline of synthetic chemicals and the growth of biological development and use?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a key piece to it. Again, it's going back to that understanding what I applied, how much I applied, when it was applied, where it was applied, and then what the results of that. So there's a precision application, but precision harvest, understanding what the results were of that. So I think these sorts of tools are really a key piece of understanding the result of the different biologicals, and at the end of the day it should be, it may cost more money when you look at it compared to your traditional, but you should be applying it differently. It should give you different results, and at the end of the day it should help you be more profitable. So if you don't have all the data sets lined up to understand what the larger results were, if you're just looking at my cost of this compared to the cost of the biological, it's not a fair comparison, because you might have to apply less of something else, or you might get a different yield result, or if you lose 10% less to a pest because you did some, like, these are things that, again, you need more information, and all of this is kind of building an airplane as we're flying, and kind of learning it as an industry. And so again, just go back to the more information we have, the better we can do kind of those applications. I think it's key to transition to the biologicals and other types of things that we have coming down the pipeline.
Sure. Lawrence, Peter, did you have something?
Yeah, can I just make a quick comment? I think that this precision ag technology, where spraying either conventional chemicals or biologicals, if you're not spraying it on the target and you're just spraying it on the soil, it's a waste of, it's going to improve both. So I think as we go forward in this discussion, it's not one or the other. It's not going to stem the decline. It's going to improve your use of conventional chemistry, and it also is going to improve your use of potentially biological solutions.
Okay.
I think we just add one quick point to that. And I think although the volumes could decline somewhat from the more targeted applications, there is the opportunity in value terms to offset some of that through some of the higher priced technologies, be it at the active ingredient or the formulation level, that go into these systems. And obviously, as biological adoption accelerates, those are typically higher priced products at the moment. So that again will largely offset most of that reduction, if not all of it. And if you take into account the fact that many of these markets are looking to increase their overall intensification anyway, then I think there's still some growth in the crop protection markets yet.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. We're out of time, and we thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our panelists for giving us your perspective. And again, if you're interested in the Southeast Asia region, we'll be having our virtual event on November 13th from 6 to 8:30 p.m. U.S. Pacific time. All right. Thank you, Peter, Lawrence, and Aaron, so much for joining us, and everyone take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Renee. Take care.